Good evening. I am His Reverend Nicholas Anthony Comas. My sermon today is on living the language of love. Have you decided to give something up for Lent? Imagine giving up chocolate, then going to a meal with someone, and then after dinner mints get passed around, and the host says, "Go on, just one. It doesn't make a difference. Your host is Satan." At least that's the conclusion I draw from a gospel I recently read. Mark chapter 8, passages 31 to the end. What we have here is an example of social pressure, and this is Satan. For this is what Jesus is resisting. Consider that Satan is the accuser, the prosecuting lawyer in a court case. He is also described as being the prince of the world. And sometimes the pressures of public opinion can be severe. If you stick out, then the finger will point at you. It can be much safer to go with the flow and keep your head down. Jesus criticizes Peter for confusing the things of God and the things of man. It is the latter where Satan holds sway. Social pressure has ways of disguising itself and is often couched with the language of should and ought. I want to suggest that we need to exercise a godly suspicion where this is language used. Sometimes what is being recommended with a should or an ought is of God. Example, you should pray more. But sometimes it isn't. I'd like to propose a way of discriminating between the shoulds are good and when they are otherwise. The simple question is, can the should thought be rephrased in terms of the great commandments? The first and greatest commandment is to love God with all of our heart, and our soul, all our minds, and all of our strength. This comes first and is the most important command. I see this as intimately bound with vocation, the sense of who we are before God and who God is calling us to become. And the second commandment is alike, namely, we must love our neighbors as ourselves. In other words, we are called to share the love of God with each other, to look after each other and care for one another, to nurture each other and forgive each other, so that all might enjoy the life that God intends for us. Let me give you two examples which may make things clear. Imagine a musician, say a teenager, being exhorted to practice his instrument by his parents. Perhaps it was an expensive instrument, and the parents say, "We've spent so much on your music lessons, you should be doing more with it." Contrast with this thought, I have a gift from God, and it fills me with joy to play my instrument. I am more myself when I'm playing this than when I'm not. Both forms of language might lead to the teenager playing the instrument, but only one is inspired by love. Like there's a latest U2 album. There's a marvelous song which contains the words, "It's effectively a song of praise addressed to God. I was born to sing for you." When Bono is singing and that he is expressing his vocation, he should be the person God called to be. My point is that if we cannot rephrase the should into something which inspires and enables life, then it's just social pressure and is satanic. A second example, a middle school daughter who has taken on the principal burden of caring for an elderly aunt despite having other siblings equally connected, and the request comes in to go and visit and to do her shopping. Is this a should? You ought to go and do it because if you don't, nobody else will? Or is this actually, I love my Aunt Nellie. I enjoy seeing her and I don't want her to experience her hardship. If we can rephrase the ought of into something that allows us to experience the joy of loving someone else, the joy of caring for someone else, enabling them to live and to flourish, then it is godly. But if not, it is just social pressure, and worse, it opens up scope for being abused. Which brings us back to Jesus on the road to Jerusalem. I love this little verse. He spoke plainly about this. It's a strange thing to have written in a text which has just said pretty clearly what Jesus was saying. The passage only makes sense if you think of it as something spoken and written down. Think of Peter sharing his memories with Mark and emphasizing he spoke plainly about this, which must have been a comfort to Christ at the time when he was preparing to take up his cross. And what does this cross symbolize? The tree upon which he was hung that, in Paul's words, allowed Christ to become a curse for us. What does it mean for us to take up the cross? It means that if we follow the two commandments, if we abandon the language of should and ought, and start to live the language of love, If we allow the love of God to shape us and enable us to share that love in the world, then we will come into conflict with the world. We will then become light shining in the darkness, and all those who cling to darkness will not exist. They will have to take up their own cross in their own life. Yet, Jesus had to be specific about this vocation, this claim upon him from the Father, which he had never allowed to break. This is why he was without sin. Sin is simply something, anyone which breaks the commandment or the relationship with our Father. Anything which disrupts our obedience to the first commandment. Jesus never allowed that relationship to be broken. He was true to his vocation to the bitter end when he died on the cross to save us from sins. He could have gained the whole world, but the world would not have been enough. In the same way, each time that we give in to social pressure, we lose a little bit of our souls. And what does it profit us if we gain the whole world but lose our own souls, which mean more to us than anything except our love for God? Jesus came to set us free, to become children of God. What does this mean if that we allow God to take charge of our lives? That we live as his children, as heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. And then if we walk in his path, we take up a cross and follow him, then we can share in the ultimate victory and enjoy a risen life with him. Thank you.